Hi there, welcome to Nepi Invest. In this June quarter Appendix 4C video, I am going to be discussing one of my favorite companies on the ASX, and that is SciDev. It has been said by much more famous people and smarter people than I that you should not fall in love with companies that you invest in. And it does make sense when you think about the logic behind that, because when you do fall in love with a company, instead of letting logic and reason guide your decision-making processes, you let your emotions take control of that very important process. And you don't want your emotions to decide whether you buy, hold, or sell a company. You want logic and reason to decide that for you. And that's why you should not fall in love with a company. And that's why I don't love SciDev. It's just one of my favorite companies. And the reason SciDev is one of my favorite companies is simply what they do and where they're heading. And SciDev is all about solving other companies' water issues, in particular, dealing with the separations of solid and liquids. And I do think that water resource management over the next century is going to be a booming industry as humans realize that water is our most important resource. I've already discussed what SciDev does. They're all about water resource management, in particular, dealing with the separation of solids and liquids. Now, they do have 4 verticals, and when I first invested in SciDev, they only had 2 verticals. So they've grown their business over the past few years from when I invested in this company about 2-3 years ago. And that is another thing I'm quite positive about this company moving forward, is they've increased the verticals and more business is coming in, and the amount of customers they are gaining and trust. So they're developing relationships with these customers, and some of these customers are fairly big. For example, they're working with Fortescue Metals now, BHP, those sort of companies, very big mining companies, some of the biggest mining companies in the world. And as you develop relationships with these big mining companies, I think those relationships means you're more likely to get significant contracts in the future. SciDev's ticker code STV, market cap 149 million. It has grown over the last 3 years since I started to invest in this company. Receipts to customers for the financial year 21, and we do have these numbers, even though they haven't released their full year results yet, because we do have these numbers through their Appendix 4C. Receipts to customers in financial year 21 up to 42 million. And when I first invested in this company just over 2 years ago, they had almost 0 receipts, or very low receipts. So they've grown receipts at a phenomenal rate in the past 8 quarters. Operational cash flow negative for the financial year. However, they have been operational cash flow positive the last 2 quarters. So things are heading in the right direction for this company. I highly recommend going to their Appendix 4C, which they released on the 26th of July, or reading any of their presentations. But the best source of information on any company, including SciDev, is their own website. And it's just a trove of information. So if you had to go to one place for any information on this company, go to their website. Before we have a look at the June quarter results for SciDev, I just want to go back to the March quarter just to see how things were going at that point in time, and then to see how business has progressed over the 3-month period that finished about 5 weeks ago from the time I'm doing this video on the 9th of August. So we are in the September quarter, and we're almost halfway through the September quarter. However, receipts of customers for SciDev in the March quarter, 11.3 million. And they were operational cash flow positive by 1.5 million. That means they did grow their cash during the quarter from 7.1 million to 8.1 million. So I always like to see cash on hand in the business. They do have a little bit of debt, but that very fact they have cash on hand means there is a little bit of flexibility there. And the most important thing here for SciDev and any company that is operational cash flow positive and free cash flow positive, that's even more important when it comes to companies, is they can fund growth in the future through their operations. They don't have to raise money through capital or borrow money to grow in the future. They can actually grow using the money they've generated in their business. And that's a very important inflection point for any company, including SciDev. On to the June quarter we go, and things have progressed really nicely for SciDev from the end of the March quarter to the end of the June quarter. Receipts to customers up to 14.7 million. And one of the things I really like about SciDev is that rapid growth in receipts over the past 2 years. We'll have a look at that in the next slide. You can't ignore that. And because they are increasing their receipts, a lot of that is going down the bottom line. So they have been operational cash flow positive for the last 2 quarters, including the June quarter. Operational cash flow positive by $1.4 million. And I talked about how when a company becomes operational cash flow positive, they can do things with that money that will be beneficial for the company in the long run. And what SciDev has done, or did do during the June quarter, with that money they received in operations over the previous 2 quarters, the March and June quarter, was they made an acquisition that hopefully over the next 5 years will be highly beneficial to the company and the shareholders. They also paid down debt. And I don't like companies to have too much debt or any debt at all, particularly companies in the life cycle where SciDev find themselves right now. I prefer these companies to be as debt-free as possible because debt can be a destroyer of a company if things go a little bit pear-shaped for just 6 months, 9 months. So I prefer companies not to have debt, and they are paying down some debt. That's something I do like, what management are dealing or how they're dealing with their cash they are generating in their business. So they did burn through $1.1 million of cash during the quarter and finished the June quarter with $7 million of cash. But again, they made an acquisition and paid down debt. So those are 2 ticks in my book. When I first invested in SciDev, they had 2 verticals. That was the mining and mineral processing and the construction and infrastructure. And over the past 2 years, they've made 2 very significant acquisitions. And when I say significant, I don't mean monetary terms. I mean in terms of growing the overall business. And that was in the oil and gas and water. And you will sometimes hear some people say, and I've heard this a few times, that overall acquisitions are bad for a company because when you take the average in terms of whether acquisitions create wealth or destroy wealth for shareholders, the average tells you, and this is more applicable to larger cap companies, that acquisitions tend to destroy shareholder wealth, not create shareholder wealth. But that's actually not true for smaller cap companies like SciDev. In fact, it's reversed. Acquisitions overall tend to increase shareholder wealth, not destroy it. And it all depends on whether the acquisition is a smart play by the company and the management. And what SciDev have done over the past few years is quite smart. They've increased their verticals from 2 to 4. And one of the reasons why it's important is this little table they've provided in their activities report. And why I mean by it's important is when you go through these quarter-on-quarter revenue through all these verticals, you can see for some of these verticals, it is quite lumpy, particularly construction and infrastructure. If you go to quarter 1, $2.7 million in revenue, then the next one was only $387,000. Quarter 3 was up to $3.1 million, and then quarter 4 was back down to $951,000. So quite lumpy when you're talking about construction and infrastructure. And the same thing for mining and mineral processing, $2.9 million to $4.2 million, back to $2.9 million, and then up to $4.9 million. And those 2 lumpy sort of verticals were their original verticals. And then they've acquired businesses in the oil and gas space and the water space. And that's really helped to even out this lumpiness in their revenue. And they've grown their revenue in almost each and every quarter. They went a bit back in quarter 2, but it's grown quite considerably over the past few years. So let's have a look at the receipts history going back to well before I bought into this company. To be honest with you, this is one of my favorite things when it comes to SciDev, is this receipts history graph that shows you the receipts going through time back to the March quarter in 2017. And from that March quarter 2017 to the June quarter 2019, receipts were going up very slowly, but they were increasing, but the rate of increase was insignificant. And just remember when receipts started to grow here, they started to grow between the June quarter 2019 and the September quarter of the same year. They went from 770,000 to 1.5 million, and they've just kept on growing ever since then. There was one quarter where they came down a little bit, well actually not a bit, they went from 8.2 million to 5.7 million between June 2020 and September 2020. However, it has been growing. There's been a consistent growth. In fact, you could almost say it's been exponentially growing since 2019. So just remember when receipts started to grow for SciDev, and when I show you the chart, you'll see the correlation between the receipts growing in SciDev and the significant increase in the share price during that same period of time. When you calculate the compound quarterly growth rate in receipts from March quarter 2017, you do get an impressive growth rate of 23% per quarter. But if you ignore that first 2 and a bit years where receipts were growing very slowly and only look over the past 2 years, receipts have been growing at 45% per quarter. And if you said that that's per year, you would be impressed, but this is per quarter. And this is one of the reasons I do like this company, is they are gaining traction in their business. They're becoming more well-known simply because they're developing relationships with these big companies, these big mining companies like Fortescue, BHP, Iluka, major mining companies in Australia and internationally. And when smaller mining companies see that SciDev is developing relationships with these big mining companies, that actually is good news for SciDev moving forward. Now on to the weekly chart for SciDev, and this goes back to late 2018 because I just wanted to show you what happened in 2019 with the share price. And this company did reach an inflection point in the business. That's when receipts started to grow between the June quarter and the September quarter. And that's also when we started to see the share price grow with this company. It broke out in July or start of August. The share price moved from around about 5 cents to about 10 cents or above 10 cents and just kept on moving up. So in fact, it went from about 5 cents to a top of 95 cents in or just before the COVID-19 financial panic. And then, of course, the share price fell off a cliff, went all the way from 95 cents down to a low of 25 cents. But the share price has recovered. And there's little doubt or little way you could argue with me that the share price is not in an uptrend when you look at the long term here. There is a little bit of volatility with the share price when you look at the daily chart. It can go up a fair bit and down a fair bit in 1 week periods. You see these pretty long candlesticks here. And so this is a 1 week candlestick, so pretty long 1 week candlesticks here. And that just shows you there's a little bit of volatility, so not quite as liquidly traded as I would like. And when a company does become more liquidly traded, you tend to smooth out those big up weeks and those big down weeks. But generally, the share price is in an uptrend, and currently the share price of SciDev is at 96 cents. And we've only seen the share price higher at one point in time during SciDev's history, and that was back towards April of this year. As I continue down this road on achieving my mission on doing a video on every single ASX company that achieved an operational cash flow positive June quarter, I will continue doing these videos which will be dedicated to the one company. So look out for videos on Ansarada, AI Media, Arctus, and Alcidion, or AE starting names, over the next week. But I've also decided to lump a group of companies into the one video. And these companies I'll be lumping together in the one video are those sort of companies where I really don't want to do more research on, or I don't have a lot of research yet. And some of the reasons why I don't want to do more research on these companies is something, or can be something simple, like the only reason they achieved operational cash flow positive was because they received government grants and tax incentives. So wide range of different reasons. But I decided just to lump those companies into the one video. So 4 companies per video. And that way I can get through this series a little bit quicker. That is all I have for this June quarter Appendix 4C video for SciDev. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this company or any other company on the ASX. So leave it in the comment section of this video and I'll answer anything you have to say in the next few weeks. Otherwise, I am not a financial advisor. If you do need financial advice, make sure you seek out someone who is qualified and can speak to your own financial needs. That's it for this video. Have a good day. Bye.